Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
I think there's
She-
some-
Yeah.
there's rights
Yeah.
for what the wages. What the
What?
wages to buy.
United States of America,
To the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so this is not our regular monthly meeting, which that will be next week, the 20th. This is a public hearing for the proposed, for the resolution to reduce the number of town justices from 2 to 1. And then a second public hearing on short-term rental legislation. So we'll start with the public hearing on the justices. Somebody want to make that motion? Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is open for any discussion. I know, Betsy, you wanted to say
Yes,
something.
I do want to say a couple of things.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, though, the resolution in front of me. I can be heard. I don't have the resolution in front of me, and I have a couple of comments to make. I will finish my final term in December. I'm planning to retire after that. And the other judge is, my understanding is he may have already tendered his resignation, but he will be doing so in August if he hasn't already. And I don't know the state of that. I just don't remember what he told me about it, but sometime in August. I presume then that the town would be looking to appoint a judge, a town justice is the proper term, for the balance of 2023. And then your resolution calls for the one justice to start in January 1st, 2024. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So my concerns have to do with the fact that I'm basically not in favor of having only one judge, unless, and I think it would be proper for the board, if you wouldn't mind, to consider the possibility that having one judge may become a position that nobody wants because of the fact that the town justices are and must be available 24 hours a day for arraignments. It is true from my experience that there are many fewer of those arraignments now because of the bail reform law, which is a state law and which has had a lot of implications for the town justices and has in fact reduced a lot of the work. I can agree with the town board, however, that the work has been reduced over the last few years, where there are many fewer motions made by defendants' attorneys and so forth, but many fewer. There is less work to be done, frankly. I therefore think that the board might also wish to consider, because of what I've said, if I haven't said it all, I'll try to figure that out, or you can ask me. I really think if you have one judge, it should be a lawyer. And under the state law, though, the town justice does not have to have a law degree, does not have had to practice law. But if you're going to one judge, which for some reason is rare in the state, I believe, I don't know, Jeff, you've done some research on this, I'm sure. And I talked to the resource center in Albany. They seem to think it's rare that a town will go to one judge, but frankly, I think you're not thinking incorrectly, except for the fact of that one slightly burdensome thing about having to be available for arraignments at 24 hours a day. And I think, therefore, I would hope that you would consider having a lawyer as the judge for the town, or whoever runs for judge. I think both parties should consider there should be lawyers. That's basically the biggest thing I wanted to tell you all this evening.
But isn't it true though, Betsy, like if there's an arraignment and you're not available, that they would call?
We've been doing this for 60 years, well,
Right.
only 50 years that I've been here. And what they've been doing is calling. I mean, but I've gotten in trouble because neither of the two judges here were available. I got in big trouble with the town of Stanford because the judge up there, who really turned out to be very nice, wrote a letter to the state or something and said nobody's ever available in Millbrook, which was a slight exaggeration. However, if you do that, I think the judge or the court clerk or somebody the court clerks often know each other pretty well. They should be sure that they have a good rapport. Because it might be a situation where it's hard for the one judge to return the favor. And what I did have lunch with the judge in Stanford, this is about 10 years ago, to say, let's be friends. We can help each other out, and we have done that. Many of our arraignments have been done by Ren Abrams in Amenia, or not so much the Dover judge. Stanford, Pleasant Valley, and Amenia are the closest courts to us. And there is a general understanding in the judges that other judges will be available. The state police really don't have much complaint because they're not having as many arraignments. They're not making those kinds of arrests.
Betsy, I have a question.
Yeah.
Aside from arraignments, the duties of the town justice is Tuesday nights and another night within the month. Right now, you alternate between judges covering those nights.
Yes.
If it's a single judge and that judge needs vacation and they're away, how did that get covered in the past, or were you?
We always made sure.
available?
I would cover for Jeff if he was going on vacation, or if he's taking his kids to, and they were various kinds of ball teams and so forth.
So perhaps that's a research project, Jeff. Any sense of when a community does have one judge and that judge does take a vacation, how are those courts covered?
Provision in the state law that the Office of Court Administration can appoint a judge, a justice, to temporarily cover for someone who's asked for vacation or illness.
And appoint a judge, I mean, a member of, a resident of the town.
No, a judge from
From
another
another-
town.
We have had other,
Independent.
certain real estate things have to be done in certain ways. And we have had to have a judge come here when, if Jeff and I, or when it was Bruce Aubin, Bruce and I both were conflicted and couldn't handle a case and had to recuse ourselves for a variety of reasons. A judge from another court would come here to hear the case. Sometimes you can just transfer the case to another court. Depends on whether there's local real estate involved. And so that's been done in the past.
Okay.
I don't think that would be I think the concern would be, I think we have in the past found other judges. We have had to borrow a court clerk sometimes from another jurisdiction because the various courts don't all sit on the same night. So, and I don't know in my head, the court clerk is the important person. By the way, the court clerk is the most important person in this whole system in terms of town judges. That is the person who does the most work. And that is, I mean, the judges know the most law, and after many years of doing it, it's easy to handle the work. I don't think it's overburdensome for one person who's really interested, but to be sure that the job is made interesting enough for someone to run for. I think a decent salary, a really good court clerk, some discussion of other jurisdictions doing arraignments.
So just to address the comment, Betsy, about, which is really valid, about it sort of maybe being not as common. There is a group of supervisors from the Eastern Dutchess municipality. Actually, one put together a task force just to look at this issue because a lot of towns are having the issue of not having as much work, having the cost of having two judges and how can we work together with coverage. And so I think it's an opportune time for us to be having this conversation, and your
It
feedback
is,
invaluable.
Leslie,
Yeah.
and more than that, since I first became judge, and early on, I was one of the trainers for state, for the 12 hours of training that every judge has to take every year, and got to know a lot of the state people. There has been a push in the state of New York for as long as I've been involved to consolidate courts more. I think the local court people, the State Magistrates Association, to be clear, are opposed to that. Most people like the idea of having a local court.
Yeah.
And I frankly think I still think that's a good idea. I still think it should be a lawyer. And I think it's not within the realm, it's not without the realm of possibility that there would be a court or that there would be an arraignment center, let's say at Troop K
Right.
for several towns, but that the courts would stay local. And I think that's one of the things they've been talking about, and probably one of these, there are several groups that are studying a variety of things, but the consolidation, of course, is one. And so what the town board needs to continue to consider from a, municipal and philosophical point of view is whether it's important to have a local court where local people who know each other can be involved. And that's a long discussion, it's kind of a philosophical discussion, or whether in the end you end up going to Poughkeepsie or something. But the Troop K sits in the middle of this county, right in the middle. So it's most logical, although they've just covered their property with a whole new building. So which is all about forensics, actually. Yeah. And that's an interesting point, another interesting discussion, but not for tonight.
Betsy, how long have you been on the bench here?
1978. I was appointed. And I forgot to go home.
It won't be the same for us.
Yeah, that's for
Oh,
sure.
I think it will, actually.
You know it won't be.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other comments?
Just a question.
Deirdre?
If you decide to go to one judge and you deem that it is too much work for one judge and you want to go back to two, what's the mechanism to do that for?
It's just board resolution. There's we don't have to wait, right, Jeff? That was a question that we had. We have to wait for the end of a 4-year term to reduce from 2 to 1, but we don't have to wait to add.
Okay,
That was, I think, definitely a part of our consideration.
definitely. So you have that fallback,
Yeah.
you can do it, you can add it anytime.
100%.
It has, if I may, it has generally become the practice all over the state of New York to plea bargain cases in the local courts. That's and that's been moving toward plea bargaining for the last 45 years. And that's one of the reasons why we don't get the work that I used to have a lot of work, and so did the other judge, because when people were arrested for misdemeanors, often their attorneys would do a lot of motion practice. And that takes a lot of paperwork and a lot of decision-making and research and so forth. That's not so much the case now. And then rarely is there a case. I'm not sure whether, Jeff, do you know whether there are, in places like the city of Poughkeepsie, in places like Beacon, in the bigger jurisdictions, in LaGrange, there probably are trials. In the small towns out here on the Eastern Dutchess, there rarely is a trial. I don't know what your experience is with other courts.
I guess I can say that I'm a justice of the town of Pleasant Valley. I was appointed last September, so I've had a few trials, but they've been landlord-tenant matters.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I had one small claim trial.
Yeah.
But generally, most matters are plea bargained and settled.
Thank you, Betsy.
Any other comments or questions?
Any lawyers?
I see Patsy's on. Patsy, do you have
There's some more people.
any other questions?
Nope, that was perfectly clear. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. What? Okay,
Hi, I'm sorry. I can't seem to get my device out of safe mode for this. I just wanted to find out, I think Trip K is a great idea, but what about the county building since the Eastern Dutchess County Center is right there as well? Would it make sense to use that building?
For what?
I didn't hear
For what?
that.
Central
Here's
Marine.
the Eastern Dutchess County that goes on down here.
Use it for what?
I think
Yeah, use it for what? I don't-
Betsy suggested an arraignment.
Oh, the
center in
arraignment center
Troop
for
K.
the county?
I don't,
Oh,
we're not, yeah, I mean,
That would be
that,
a county.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
has nothing to do with us.
That would be a county
Yeah,
decision.
exactly.
that's a great suggestion. But I don't, a lot of that, for what we're talking about here, that we wouldn't be making that, that call. If there was to be, it would be a more countywide, and they're having that conversation countywide about courts right now. So that might be one of the things that they would consider. And if they ask for our input, that's a great suggestion for us to make.
And by the way, so that people understand, Jeff will certainly back this up. There are courts that are very busy, probably mostly for the clerks, because, for example, if the Taconic goes through
Yeah.
your jurisdiction, there's a lot more activity with the troopers, and therefore there's a lot more fines are paid and so forth. And it becomes it's an administrative job in many ways, but in the courts that are more higher, where there's a higher population, like the city of Poughkeepsie and the town of Poughkeepsie, there probably are a lot more. I don't know how motion practice is going these days, but it doesn't seem to be going very far.
Okay, anyone else? Alon, you're okay? Any other questions? Okay. Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So are we ready to vote on this, or do you need more discussion?
Were you conducting business tonight?
Yes, I think we were gonna probably do that at the meeting, right?
Yeah.
Or
Next
do we-
Okay.
Why can't we do it tonight?
Advertised just for public hearings or also a business meeting? I don't-
It was advertised that there were public hearings tonight, that your general business meeting was next week, but I don't see a reason why you couldn't vote if you wanted to.
I mean, we'd just be delaying it a little, basically. You post.
I mean, Jeff, if you don't have a problem with it procedurally, and Mary,
So we seem to have a handle on coverage.
Yes.
Full disclosure, part of this discussion, and the reason this resolution came forward was we were looking at the budget of the court. And the busyness of the court, as Betsy has referred to. So we've got numbers on that, and that certainly is further discussion with perhaps assistance from another municipality, but
Yeah, we've talked, and I've talked to her, and so has Leslie, Betsy Moss. at
Yeah.
Unionville.
they're starting that
She's
committee.
willing
Yeah.
to, you know, we need help.
I think too, with November coming. Thank you. To have a judge in the community, we've got to move in order to have that fulfilled, in order to have that listed, so,
and to have coverage, which I think we're.
and we have to appoint somebody.
We're gonna appoint for August, because Jeff is
Advertised for that,
August is his last.
is that the idea?
Yeah,
Okay.
are you talking about the possibility of appointing a second judge for the rest of the?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that way that
Yeah.
there's coverage. Yeah.
And how does the board plan to go about that?
Well, I think we were going to advertise for starters, right? Is that the idea? Is that what we think?
Well, we haven't come up with any
Right,
names.
or to ask actually an attorney, I had an idea of someone who is a retired
I have an idea
judge.
of a recently retired judge.
Great.
I think you'd be interested in hearing.
And then I believe the political parties are looking for whoever would be candidates.
Yeah, I have,
Because that's a totally different process.
yes, it is,
So Betsy,
exactly.
would you email that name to us?
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I mean, that would be the start of our advertising.
And would you train that person for us?
So we'll at least have that.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I think we have to get that.
Interrupt them. I had prepared a resolution and introduction where you introduce this local law, but I didn't prepare a resolution of adoption for tonight. So I do think
We
you should
should wait till
Wait,
next
no.
week.
consider this to.
All right, so next week.
And I'll prepare a
Okay.
resolution
Yeah,
for you. so for
okay.
the record to you.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should close it now or leave it open?
You already closed.
We
the
closed
public
it.
hearing,
Closed it,
so,
yeah.
yeah, that's fine. I'll just prepare the
Yeah.
written resolution,
Okay.
have it ready for next.
So we
Thursday.
don't have to revisit.
Yeah.
Just-
And again, Betsy, we can't thank you enough for all that you've given us, believe me. Well deserved, right.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion to open the public hearing on the short-term rentals.
Motion?
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is open. Now, did you want to lead
I'll
off?
just
Any
give a-
comments, Mike?
An introduction. This is a process that has been going on for, I would say, more than 3 years. It first came to our attention, the concept of short-term rentals came to our attention more through publications on the state level that were trickling down to various communities, making all the communities aware that this phenomena of short-term rentals was beginning to appear, mostly in destination communities. The most prominent one 3 years ago that became kind of contentious was the Lake Placid area, which is a 12-month destination for winter and summer recreation. And the contention there was the motels, hotels, bed and breakfasts felt that they were being discriminated against because they were held to higher standards of operation than the short-term rentals were. And the platforms that oversee or administer the short-term rentals were not as prolific as they are now. A lot of people were using the term Airbnb, which is actually a corporate name. So the proper name for this phenomenon is short-term rentals. But as people found that the short-term rental concept was fairly lucrative, more and more people started to jump into it. And areas that were not necessarily recreational summer, winter destinations began to find short-term rentals popping up in their communities. And a short-term rental, by definition, is a facility that is rented out for a short stay, usually not more than 31 days. It became an alternative for people who wanted to go somewhere but not access a motel or a hotel. Some communities, they were not available, motels, hotels, but these homes, these annex buildings, whatever, were available. So the town started looking at it, and I organized a committee that started doing some research, and we couldn't figure out how many were in the town of Washington. And one of the requirements of a person running a short-term rental is they have to pay an occupancy tax to the Dutchess County government. So they had a record of where these short-term rentals existed in Dutchess County. And we were kind of late getting into the investigation of them. Other communities, Red Hook, Rhinebeck, City of Beacon, Town of Poughkeepsie, some 17 communities throughout the Hudson Valley were already looking into this phenomenon. What we found out by contacting Dutchess County was there were more than 40 in the town of Washington, and this was 3 years ago, and there were about 13 in the village. When we tried to inquire of who they were and where they were, they could not disclose those names because many of them were listed under LLC corporations. So therefore, the owner themselves was not readily available. So we went online a few times just to call them up, and we found some in southern town of Washington, eastern, close to the village. We even looked up some of the village ones, western, and we started to take a look and saying they're running these businesses in areas of town of Washington that are basically non-commercial areas. So they're a commercial entity being run in a non-commercial entity area. So we started investigating, and we decided that looking at our code, there is nothing in the code at that time referring to short-term rentals. There are bed and breakfasts, there are motels, there are hotels, there are inns that are code restrictive and have regulations, and people need permits in order to operate those types of businesses. So we formed a committee, we started researching, we collected existing local laws from various communities, some as far as the Adirondacks, some Rhinebeck, Red Hook, Town of Poughkeepsie, City of Beacon, City of Poughkeepsie, even Dutchess County sent us what they felt were some good regulations on short-term rentals. And then about 2 years ago, or a year and a half, the state really started to try to address this issue because it was bubbling up everywhere. It was becoming contentious in some communities. They held a forum that Jeff and I attended up at the Franklin Roosevelt site in Hyde Park. At the time, I think there were 35 or 40 towns present. There was a presentation by an attorney on the state level that talked about the issue, but also gave what they thought was like a gold standard of an existing local law. So I took that back here to the town board, informed them of the research we're doing, and then we formed a committee. That committee met for about a year and a half, just kind of researching, analyzing, picking little pieces out of other local laws, trying to get some sense of how we could move on this so that there would be legislation in the code so that if someone wished to run a short-term rental, which we were all in favor of, that they would have certain rules and regulations and guidelines, particularly safety guidelines, rules and regulations on noise, congestion, parking, all the entities that typically the bed and breakfast, the inns, the motels, the hotels were held to. So of that, we drafted a proposed law that was presented to the town board a month ago, and tonight is the opportunity for the public to make comment on it. Just to let you know, we passed that local law to the county. The county has looked it through. They have passed written comments back to us, which we will take into consideration. Our planning board has taken a look at it. They passed written comments back to us, more in the line of wordsmithing some definitions. And the county and the CAC. The CAC has passed some written documents along to us. We, the committee, will take a look at that after tonight's public hearing and see if the matter or the comments are substantive. Substantive is a term which would require a complete revision of perhaps a section of the proposed law, which would be, that may be in contradiction to what the public would want. If it's wordsmithing and some of that may not be substantive, then we can get the committee to go in and do some of that wordsmithing to try and get it to read a little bit more clearly. But it's been out in the public, it's been posted on our website. People have had an opportunity to read it, so this is why we're holding the public hearing tonight. This proposed law is specific just to the town of Washington. It does not apply to the village. The village is currently in the process of developing their own rules and regulations on short-term rentals, and they will have to go through a similar approval process like we're going through tonight. So that's where we're at.
Very
Mike,
good, very good.
do you think we should mention Granicus and all to them? Be a good idea.
Besides the short-term rental proposed law, which will then give jurisdiction to the owner, but also our building inspector office here, and also to the town board to make sure of public safety for the residents of the town. There is a national organization called Granicus. They popped up about 5 years ago to address, helping communities address the issues of short-term rentals. Currently, about 17 municipalities within the Hudson Valley have contracted with Granicus. What they do, they're located down in Maryland, but what they do is they have the capacity within their government or their corporate structure to keep track of the progress of short-term rental platforms within communities. So a platform might be somebody like Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway. There's a multitude of them where a short-term rental person contracts with the platform to handle all the marketing and all the solicitation and all the record keeping for a renter who might come into their property. They even collect the rents that are established as a contract between the platform and the short-term rental owner to set the rate. From that rate, the corporation takes their fee. They also pay the community tax from their platform. I have a short-term rental up in Maine. My short-term rental goes through me. But when I was doing it with HomeAway handled all of that. They paid the municipality the tax out of that money that went to them directly from the renter, and then I got the net. So this Granicus company uses assessments of Facebook, online advertising to track and see what entities within your town are doing short-term rentals. They can tell if the person is in compliance with the rules of that town or they're non-compliant. They will also assist with complaints, contacting the owners, because they will have the names of the owners and the, not just the LLC, but the actual property owner to cover complaints and so on. So we are, and the committee is going to recommend to the board that we do hire Granicus to assist us. Going along outside of the local law, there will be a permitting process for the short-term rentals. We have decided within the law, only because we don't want it to be so cumbersome on the building inspector's office, that every year 30 to 40 people are looking for permits. We're going to be doing a 2-year permitting process, where if a person is approved for a short-term rental, they'll get a 2-year permit that'll allow them for 24 months of operating the short-term rental if the law is adopted, under the rules and regulations of the law. The registration fee for that will be $1,050. That's $500 some per year. We decided upon that figure because we did an analysis of all the expenses that will be required of the building inspector's time, the paperwork that will be involved, the inspections that will need to take place. Sometimes applications before zoning or planning, if it's a brand new build that's going to be a short-term rental. So that $1,050 we hope will offset the cost. And we did that analysis based on 30 applications rather than plus 40. If it's plus 40, we'll have a little bit more money in the pool to move forward. But that would be every 2 years an applicant would have to apply. In analyzing what people are charging for short-term rental night stays, Granicus helped us in the beginning just as to show us what they could do. They found that some of the night stays are $250 an evening or a night, to as much as $450, $600 a night. So as a business person running a short-term rental, and that kind of fee of $1,050, it's not really going to come out of your pocket, because as a business person, you're going to probably pass that on to the renter to cover that kind of expense. So we've taken all of that into consideration. It's in the law, and that's what we're moving forward to try and do. The other issue that has come forward verbally from a lot of people is, why didn't we consider owner-occupied short-term rental restriction? And the reason for that, Granicus, again, and some of the research that we did through legal, they're having court cases that have been pushed up to the federal lower levels, and the courts have decided you can't do that. So that's why we did not put that into our local law.
Could you clarify that? I don't understand.
some communities attempted to say that if you're running a short-term rental, the owner had to be in
Yeah, on premise.
on premise or actually in small community, tight communities like a village, they were actually in the building. Some platforms challenged that in courts, and it got pushed through several courts, and the courts came back and said, we agree with the platforms, you can't require the owner to be present. However, you can require a specific list of rules and regulations that will allow you to have immediate access if there are complaints, if they're out of compliance, if there's noise ordinance breaking, and the ability to pull the application, and therefore that person no longer can run that business. And that would all go through the building department, just as if a building permit for construction was issued and they're out of compliance, we can cease and desist and pull the permit.
Mike, did you want to mention too that when the comprehensive plan review committee did the hospitality study, short-term rental was part of that exercise, and the majority of residents in the town of Washington so that they did want short-term rentals with access to them and the ability to have them if they want to, but they want them regulated.
When that issue came up as a result of wanting to assess hospitality in the town, we had been working on this short-term rental issue for about 1.5 years, 2 years. So I met with their committee and suggested that be part of the community survey that went out on hospitality. And the feedback that we got is people are in favor of an additional type of hospitality besides an inn or a motel, hotel. The community is in favor of short-term rentals. The key to the short-term rental local law is the safety of both the community and the person that's running the short-term rental. We want to make sure that people are protected. And so that's why, and the neighbors. And as you saw in the law, there are going to be regulations that will require notification of neighbors and so on and so forth. We even got down to, if you saw in the law, if the short-term rental in the town is on an acre or less, we actually require a demarcation of boundaries so that the renter knows the property they're supposed to be on and not venture off onto someone else's property. On the much larger properties, notification of neighbors within 500 yards and so on would be protocols. But all of that was developed over about 1.5 years, 2 years of this committee discussing, pulling laws from other communities and taking a look. So that's where we're at, and that's why we're having the public hearing.
One other thing, Granicus also would man a 24/7 hotline, compliance hotline. So they, if they got a neighbor that complained, they could complain at 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And Granicus would have the name of the contact person to contact if there was a disturbance, to make sure that they were contacted to take care of it or whatever issue.
Yeah, and and Bobby was on the committee, Mr. Odia, and Richard Phillips was on it, John Parisi, Mary Alex, James Finley, and Jeff Battistone. We were the committee that was meeting to try and kind of flesh this out and get this down into writing. But as I said, we have gotten some written responses back, which we will hold a committee meeting and analyze those and see if they're substantive or not.
I totally understand having to regulate and safety, and most of us, I'm sure, do that anyway. But the amount of days and the amount of permits, like my property has cabins on it and it's not really residential. So I would only be able to rent 2 of them out.
We had quite a bit of a discussion about that. And the reason we settled on 2 is we were finding through information that we brought down from the state, but also from other communities. There are communities where investment companies have started to identify some high-end communities, particularly the oceanfront communities and the mountain communities that are attractive for ski resorts. And they are buying up properties as soon as they hit the market. And they're converting them to short-term rentals rather than buying them and selling them through the mortgage process. There are some communities such as the Newport area in Rhode Island and some of the Cape Cod regions where literally off-season they are there are streets that they are now calling blackout streets, which means the entire street has no lights, no cars in the driveways, nothing on the off seasons, because the entire street is a short-term rental street. The other thing that we discovered was in some of these communities, particularly in small villages and towns down in the southern parts of the country, and even in the Adirondack areas of New York State, the ability to have the community have housing that's affordable for people and the community people to stay are being bought out by these investment companies who are coming in and buying those properties. So you begin to lose the integrity and the spirit and the history of that community by these investment companies coming in and buying up these entities. So we did not want to become so restrictive that we started limiting, but we felt that maximum of 2 to start out with was appropriate.
Would that be a case by case? I mean, would there be a way to
Grandfathers.
Yeah, or like, like my property isn't a resident, like, it's not big enough for families, it's just little cabins. So would it be,
You can note that and then you can take it back to the committee and rediscuss that.
So does each cabin have a kitchen and bathrooms and bedrooms?
one room?
Okay, and are they classified as accessory buildings now to a principal building? Is there enough acreage to allow them to be accessory buildings?
Yeah, they used to be rented as, one-person apartments.
As apartments, so as long-term rentals? Yeah, and you want to rent them as short-term rentals?
When I bought it, 2 of them were rented already as long-term. Yeah. So I'm already doing short-term.
So we can note that.
There
Is
is,
it, is it
there is a
commercial
provision.
property?
What, there,
Is it a commercial property?
Next to Orvis, I believe it's commercial.
so,
Would that make a difference, commercial or residential?
so there's a provision, 166.4, paragraph C,
Mhm.
that allows a person to go to the zoning board of appeals to question about the number of rooms or the number of sleeping quarters and those sort of issues.
Mhm.
I thought that was, that part of it was too lenient and left an opening for people that want to create hotels. By asking for, can I have 12 rooms, can I have 15 rooms, I got a 15-room house. So I thought that perhaps we should eliminate that paragraph. Perhaps we should work with that paragraph.
Yeah.
All right, to see how we can deal with a pre-existing grandfather situation.
I'm not sure if that is a grandfather. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
I'm sure
would
either, but,
require,
yeah.
some follow-up from the building inspector, but I think what Mike was talking about with what's happening in Rhode Island, I happen to have some
Right.
personal knowledge of it. People are buying structures and houses and making them each room into a bedroom. It's essentially a hotel without regulation. And so when you get to having multiple things that you're renting in a structure, then it becomes, and it's primarily a commercial operation. I mean, what I think the goal of this law is to allow residents to have the flexibility to rent out their property for additional income, right? Which a lot of people want to do and have the ability to do. We want to give people a place to stay, right? It's a way till we have hospitality to accommodate that, and we want to make sure that the neighbors are, it is not burdensome or a nuisance to neighbors' health and safety. So if that's kind of the intent of the law, we have to, I think maybe your circumstance may not, without having many details, fit into what the purpose of this is. That sounds like it might be one of the rental apartments that used to be long-term and are now you're trying to transfer to short-term. I'm not sure if that, how that would apply here. You have to look at it, yeah.
The other thing too is we spent a lot of time talking about, should we restrict the numbers? Because some communities not only have restricted the number, but they actually have taken a part of their community and segregated them into a particular area of the community. We felt that the marketplace in our town would settle that issue of, are there too many, are there too few? The marketplace will settle that out. If there are 40, 45, 50, we don't know right now. We hope to know at least 3 or 4 months after the law is passed, because people will be required to come in and get their permits. But I think the marketplace will help adjust that. In the law too, if someone is in violation through multiple complaints and so on, as I mentioned, the permit will be pulled and they will not be allowed to have a permit for another year if they continue to want to be in that business. But we'll take that into consideration in those things. Yes.
Mike, I wonder if you could just elaborate on this one sentence, which sounds rather sweeping to me. And maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but all other ordinances or local laws of the town of Washington, which are in conflict with the provisions of this local law, are hereby superseded or repealed to the extent necessary to give this local law force and effect during its effective period.
Mr. Attorney?
That was raised by either the CAC in their comment letter or the planning board, but that was just raised today, I saw. So we'll look at that. I think the idea is that this is a standalone chapter in the town code. If there were something in the zoning code that was contradictory to it, this would take precedence over that.
But it's a law.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, maybe some qualifiers.
It's a very sweeping statement.
It actually could be interpreted as overrides our wetlands law as well. So we could actually have a swimming pool put next to the wetlands and allow for a short-term rental, as was not allowed recently in the past. With the terminology of that section right now.
Will you be speaking to all the new provisions that we'll be having to put in place, or the requirements of the building inspector, whoever else will be inspecting Airbnbs
You have a copy?
short-term rentals? Will you be discussing tonight the provisions and the requirements of Airbnb owners tonight?
It's all in, it's in,
No, it's in the law. It's already stated in the law.
In this,
in this, yeah.
Yes, it's in the document.
I read it.
Yep.
And I still would love to hear it. Would like to know specifically what, like, is a building inspector going to come to my home and look at my Airbnb?
Yes.
And he's going to check for my fire
Correct.
and my insurance, policy,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And what else?
The exit signs.
Exit
and the-
signs.
Exit signs, all of that.
Right.
Parking,
Parking,
number of bedrooms, et cetera.
right.
All the things that are in.
As James, we wanted to relieve some of the pressure from James's office, particularly if there are 40
Mhm.
and they walk in at once.
Right,
It would be difficult to try and get him to do all of those. A number of us will be volunteering. He will be providing us with a checklist that we will go through and do a walkthrough.
thank you.
And that brings up another point too. When we were initially doing this research, we actually I talked to several fire departments, including our local fire department chiefs. And they were concerned with short-term rentals because when they get notified that there is a fire in a structure in the town, they typically know either through familiarity with your area or the dispatcher will say it's a single-family home. Well, they may be interpreting that as mother, father, 2 kids.
Mhm.
But if it's a short-term rental, there could be 10 people there if there's 5 bedrooms. So they needed to know, or they would like to know where these entities are too, so that if they are called out to that, it becomes a fire safety issue.
Great point.
Yeah, Digger.
I heard you guys mention that you're engaging Granicus. And I just wanted to let you know that I've been working on a short-term rental law with Pleasant Valley and with the village of Millbrook at the same time. And it is my understanding the county, if you engage the county with Granicus, they will pay up to $5,000 annually of your Granicus fee. The county will pay it. So you should engage the county because that's $5,003.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who with the county should we talk to?
I would talk to planning department, but I can, you can email me, Mary, and I'll get you the right contact. But it's up to $5,000 for each town and village through the counties, because the county has a contract with Granicus already.
What do they charge?
They have various,
Packages.
modes that you can buy. We're kind of down at the lower end.
Yeah.
Roughly.
$4,500
A year.
And
No
that's already,
town has covered, has spent over $5,000 yet.
and we built that into our
Fantastic.
projected expenses for the
Right.
the permit fee.
It's an annual. Annually.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Has the committee looked at the village's proposed law on STRs?
In the beginning, I did bring in a representative of the village to give him the materials that I had collected so that he and his committee could begin. We have not looked at theirs, but right from the very beginning, we said that we want to try and make sure that they're kind of compatible, that one isn't so extreme that the other. However, the village being a different kind of entity with closer structures, some smaller buildings, larger buildings, owner occupied, they're going to be faced with their own challenges there. That's why when we went through all of the laws that we collected, we kind of discounted Beacon and City of Poughkeepsie because they were addressing sewage and they were addressing fire department, police department. Those issues weren't applicable to what we were looking
All
at.
you have to do is.
But I do think that the board just got a copy of their most recent.
Yeah, I just
So
got it
when-
today as well.
Right, so
Right.
when the committee meets, I'm sure that'll,
Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna
that'll be
scrutinize.
one of the things that they'll look at.
it would be nice to see it.
Yeah.
One final thing. Someone approached me the other day saying, some communities do charge an additional tax beyond the county tax.
I could take,
on
you can
their-
take that slide thing off if you want, but you know.
But it's okay.
Very low. Who's Patsy Cola?
Has been parking and noise. Those are the biggest complaints that people typically will call up the local building department or the local clerk and complain that last night there was a big party. But the party's now gone, the renters are now gone, and you're getting a call on Monday where the party was Friday night. Granicus, this company that we will contract with, will take care of those things almost immediately. So it's not on an answering machine when our building inspector comes in on a Monday morning. It's actually, follow-up will be, but they will have all the information they need, as will the neighbors will have phone numbers that they will be able to access also.
And by having this permit system, it allows us a vehicle to enforce.
Right.
Whereas, right now, we don't have one, so there are noise violations and other things.
Well, I personally, I'm a resident of the village. There's nowhere to stay. People have nowhere to go. And last year, I have to say, I was occupied a lot. I started a small guest house that I rented out and it was very popular. This year, hardly any. So it almost feels like, we're wasting our time trying to, I don't think there's that many people staying up here. So it seems like kind of, overworrying.
And I think the marketplace is going to, Terry, is going to determine that. And we're not a destination community like a Rhinebeck or a Red Hook, or an Ocean or a ski area. But there is a need, as you saw in the survey, for the ability of people to come and stay for several nights within the community.
Yeah, this seems a little bit overdone to me.
You mean the
On
market
the rules,
saturated?
the rules, you know. So I'm objecting to that.
Okay. But you're in the village, correct?
Yeah.
So this won't affect you. The village will affect you, but ours won't.
When do we get applications?
After the law is passed, we'll then sit and develop. We've already looked at the forms that are going to be necessary for someone to stop in and get it. But once the law is passed, you have that 6-month period to keep running, and during that 6-month period, we will go either to the town clerk desk or go upstairs to the building department.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do it one more time.
Anyone on,
What's that?
Anyone online?
on Zoom?
Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to comment?
No, just to let you know, though, the last 10 or 15 minutes, we couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, sorry about that. We didn't realize it.
That's okay. Glad
Do
we
you have
could
any
hear.
questions?
No, well, who knows, but no, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just comment on that? We have had this past month, quite a few difficulties with Zoom. So I highly suggest if there's a topic that's people are interested in, that you come directly here to the town hall for the meetings so you can hear specifically what's going on. We can't guarantee the Zoom connection.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Good, thanks, Mary. Okay, so
I have a question, Gary. Yeah, I'm slow, so they pop in and out. On the rental, it says something about non-residential owner should have 2 properties. Am I reading that correctly?
Anybody.
Anybody,
Can only have a maximum of 2 permits at one time.
by the same person,
Same
on
person.
different properties. Okay. Is there a requirement to have that? Or is that your decision that 2 is a decent number?
Say that again,
The
please.
max.
Is there a requirement that you have to allow that, or have you simply decided that 2 is a decent number?
2 is the maximum right now that we're allowing a person who wants to host short-term rentals, just 2 permits are allowed.
Could that be maybe, have we looked at, you know, I
We're gonna look
understand
at that.
what you said, but maybe on the property size.
Only one per property. Only
One
one
per-
short-term property per property. So it's the 3rd paragraph.
That's much way expensive.
But a person can have 2 if they're on another property.
2 properties, 2 properties, right?
Okay.
That's to avoid, Howard, what Mike was talking about investors coming in and buying a whole lot.
Yeah, that's what I
and
was
creating-
concerned about.
And stripping a neighborhood of its,
That
community.
turn it into that in the future, that we have more people coming in because that's where the money is, so to speak, and they have short-term investment strategies. And instead of 2, it'll say 4 eventually, and then you say 6. And you have corporations who will be doing that. And right at the moment, you have Lingdale, which actually could make 10 properties. And put 20 of these things in it.
right, but if they're owned by the same entity, or
That's
even
what I'm asking.
even if a person has multiple LLCs, but they're an officer of that LLC, they would still only be able to have 2. You see?
No, I don't see I'm not that familiar with the law on LLCs. I said one person by name, me.
Right. So LLCs have partners or named partners, people.
An individual can have 2 Airbnb rentals or short-term rentals.
Or an LLC can have.
Right,
What's that?
either an individual
LLC
under an
can have
LLC
2.
or individual
But if
as
there's
an
a common
individual. or-
ownership in them, it's
Right.
just 2.
It's 2.
But that doesn't cover that, like the Cottonwood Motel.
That's a
No,
different,
that's a
that's a
different-
different code.
That's-
That's
Yeah.
a different code.
Yeah.
When the amount of days also, why do you want to limit the number of days per year? If we're all up to compliance.
The number of days per year.
We don't limit
We
that.
don't limit the
Oh,
number of
that's
days.
how it said only, you can only rent it.
Oh, a
30
short-term rental is
consecutive.
defined as renting out a facility for up to 31 days and not beyond that. Once you get beyond 31 days, it then falls into another code, which would be renting out your home, which is on a 6-month, which is
I
currently
thought it
allowed.
was, you could only rent your short-term half the year. I read that
No,
wrong.
No, 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 no.
That was wrong.
So in your case, you may just consider renting your properties as long-term rentals and not short-term rentals.
I got, no one paid me rent. It was hard.
Okay, so in motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you all. We will take all your comments under consideration and the committee will analyze that. Get back. Thank you all.
We should probably
Thanks.
write something up and drop it off here so we can add it when we have our next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
It's
Thank you
like-
for your turnout. Thank you.
You are, how many units we have. Give us some more information. so we can-
We're ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Just for me, but we always-
Yeah, give it to Mary.
Yeah.
And
No,
then
go
you grab it.
ahead.
And your name.